Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today I am joined by my friend and colleague Alex Amorosi to talk about your horoscopes for the month of November. You guys know Alex, he's my regular horoscope wingman, and I'm really glad to have him here every month helping me break down your major transits of the month. We go through all 12 signs, so you can feel free to jump ahead. We have timestamps. If you want to, you can jump ahead and hear what we have to say about your sun, moon, or rising sign, whichever you prefer to listen to. We recommend you listen to your rising sign every month because that's going to correlate to the whole sign house version of your birth chart, which is the most accurate in our opinion. But some people listen to their sun sign, so whatever you want to do. We're going to be looking at a few major transits Alex and I will discuss here at the beginning, so you might want to listen to the beginning portion so you can hear us talk about why we're focusing on the transits that we're focusing on this month, and then we'll be getting into it. Before I go any further, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share your comments and reflections as you take in your horoscope for the month. Tell us what you're anticipating, or maybe in some ways how you see the transits already starting to shape up. If you want, you can find a transcript of today's talk on the website, nightlightastrology.com. I'm going to take you over there right now because, as you guys know, our new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, begins on November 18th. If you click on the courses page, first year course, you can learn all about it. We are still accepting enrollments. The course starts pretty soon. There's 30 classes on the year. They are all held via live webinar, but everything is recorded and hosted on a class website where you can listen, watch, or download all of the material in the course. It's a really immersive program into the roots of ancient Hellenistic Greek astrology with a sort of modern archetypal and psychological twist. Between major units of study, we have breakout study sessions led by our tutoring staff, and we also have an interactive forum discussion where you can ask questions of our tutoring staff throughout the entire year. You can email me throughout the entire year. There's a lot of bonus material and guided homework if you want to do that work. Some people take the class and they take the certification exam at the end because they want to go professional. Sometimes people take the course because it's just your hobby and you're doing it for your own spiritual enrichment. So there's ways of taking the course that are really there to meet your needs. At the bottom, you'll find the different payment options. Early bird saves you $500 off. Check out the payment plan because that allows you to avoid one big payment up front and spread it out over 12 months. And also be sure to check out the need-based tuition option, which is there for people who might need to work within a fixed or tight budget for one reason or another. We know that some people, in order to not push yourself outside of your means, you need a little help for whatever reason. Please feel free to use that. We want to make sure that no one's priced out of studying astrology if it is your sincere desire to do so. I also am promoting, about once a week, we take some time to promote something from Astrology Hub, which are good friends of mine. So we're going to be taking just a minute to point you over to Astrology Hub, where you can find Astrologer Connect. astrologyhub.com. They host a lot of cool things, including courses and podcasts. I have worked for them several times and been a part of many of their programs. A lot of my colleagues, friends, former students have worked for them. I really admire the way that they focus on spiritual astrology, even if some of the people on staff come from a totally different school of astrology from myself. These are all heart-centered astrologers, and I've gotten a chance to know them personally over the years as well, which has been really cool. At any rate, the thing that I'm excited to promote is their reading service. Until we get ours up and running in 2024, they have a really nice service for people who are looking for a reading that is quicker than what I can currently offer since my wait time is spread out a ways. So if you go to Astrologer Connect, you can actually take a look at the different people on staff that they have. You can book readings in a variety of different formats that are very flexible. And when you do so, you can also take a quiz to get matched with the astrologer that really meets where you're coming from with astrology and what you're looking for in the service. They also gave a nice promo code for our audience. The promo code is Adam15. This is good to the end of November if you want to use it to save 15% off when you book a reading. A lot of the people on their staff of readers are people who have taught for me and Nightlight, who I've traveled with or spent time with at professional conferences, who are former students in some cases, or colleagues that have taught for my students before. So a really good collection of astrologers that I hope you will check out. And, there's a lot of ways you can get in touch and ask questions with them too, right there on this part of the page. So at the top of astrologyhub.com, just be sure that you go over to readings, and that will give you what you need to know. All right, so those are our promotions for the day, and I'm really excited to now welcome back onto the show, Alex. Hey.
Yo.
It's good to be back. Good for another month of astrology. We're coming off of eclipse season. You're alive, so that's good.
I'm alive. I've got yo and alive. That's about,
Right.
about as much as I got.
And I'm living.
Yo, and I'm here.
Well, I feel like I'm getting over a cold. We went to my sister's wedding last weekend. It was like right after the eclipse, and it was Mercury, Cazimi, the Sun and Mercury square Pluto over the whole weekend. Not surprisingly, like a bunch of people apparently got sick. Some people got COVID. And then I came home and we tested negative for COVID. We all have bad colds. My whole family got stuck in the airport for 9 hours with the delays and stuff. Then we got home. It was funny because we were in the airport and we were just about to catch our flight. And I go, well, that was pretty, I mean, considering all the astrology, that was like pretty stress-free. And then 9-hour delay, we get home and everyone's sick. I was like, okay, never mind.
We'll never learn as astrologers to say, oh, it doesn't seem so bad. No,
I know,
okay.
I know.
That's when the boot gets you right in the ass. It's like,
yeah, exactly. There's a famous basketball player named Dikembe Mutombo, or he used to be, and he had this thing where he'd wag his finger like, no, that's what the planets were doing to me.
Yeah, that was wild astrology, man. And this whole window has been really profound, is the Libra diplomatic word I'll use for it, but really interesting series of eclipses. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about it a lot in terms of how it showed up in my sister's chart, because my sister was getting married, and I won't go through the whole details of her chart because I don't have permission. But one thing I will say is that those transits, which were the Mercury Cazimi in Libra, the square to Pluto from the Sun and Mercury, they all hit in places in her chart that were correlating to people that she might hire in the process of the wedding. One of the things that happened, the only like super dramatic thing that happened, there were two of them. One was that after the wedding, a guest passed out. They were like dehydrated and they had to be taken to the hospital. And thankfully they just needed to be hydrated. So it wasn't like, but it was an older person, out in the sun, that kind of thing. So that was a little dramatic, but the real dramatic thing was the night before the wedding, she got a call from one of the people who was doing hair and makeup. I guess, the sort of person who she had hired to do this, that their mother was in a near-death accident and was on life support from a head-on collision. And so with like 12, I mean, of course, her first thing was just like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, Then second was like, we don't have someone to do our hair and makeup, because she was going immediately down to some other state to be with her mother who had been in this accident. So the wedding planner ended up getting in touch with a sub to do makeup and hair for like a whole bunch of women. And she brought a team with her with like less than 12 hours notice. So that was like that little scene, which of course there was a lot of emotions with something like that. It's like, oh wow, that's so heavy. And we still have to figure out how to coordinate all of this. That was the only drama, but it was really interesting because it hit in my sister's chart, like, perfectly. Like it was like, oh wow, that is.
Yeah, it's so interesting too, because like this series of eclipses, that Saros cycle was informed by a Mars-Pluto square, or infused with Mars-Pluto square just after Mars had squared Pluto on the way out of Libra. And so that sort of sudden crisis, eruptive energy, I think, was, I saw that happen in my own life in many ways too. I won't go into all of them, but it just like all the sudden, oh my God, or holy shit moments that come about. But fast moving. That's something I forget with Mars-Pluto too, is that it tends to be faster moving in that sort of eruptive idea.
So this was the first time, speaking of that I had all my mom, my dad, my sister, and I were all in the same place since my wedding 9 years ago, under the same eclipses, Libra, but flipped obviously. And I just was taking it in. I was like, because my parents are divorced. So, when are we all together in the same place? At this point in life, it's probably, as they say, marriages and funerals, So thank God it was a marriage, I mean, but it was like, it was its own kind of heaviness being there with my whole family, but it's a broken family in a way. So, it's like, that was like heavy. But then the thing that was really impactful for me was I had like that weekend, there was the way that I was processing that was all in my dreams. So the weekend was filled with some of the most lucid and powerful dreams that I've had in years. I mean, and it was like, okay. And that's the thing, is that sometimes you think the eclipse is going to hit in one way. For me, that weekend with all those transits, it wasn't anything that happened externally. It was all a lot of deeply internal stuff. Wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I found that with transits too, and I try to surrender to them now. Where I tell this to the clients too, like it's never what you think it's going to be. You can have this whole drama and fear and all the things. Even as us as astrologers, right? We know the sort of combinations that it can be, but rarely does it turn into like the things that happened in my life. I was like, oh, that's how this is coming about. Oh, okay.
Hmm.
Like what? Okay,
Yeah.
all right, let's game on. Let's do that. But um it really is a wonderful practice, I think, of sort of like, here's the weather,
Yeah.
and the weather's showing up like this, and
Yeah.
so it's not the the storm you thought it was going to be, but it's
Right.
always interesting.
If you're playing chess with the planets, not that there's something you're trying to win, I guess maybe that doesn't work, but if you're playing chess with the planets, it's like, the parameters of the game, the rules, the moves on the board, but somehow the move that the planets make always surprises you. You're always like, oh,
Hmm.
wow, I didn't see that move. It's
Hmm.
there, it's among the possibilities on the board, but I just wasn't thinking about that one in particular. And that's one of the things I love. And people are like, sometimes I've almost, especially people who don't know astrology very well, who don't know this experience, they'll be like, well, doesn't that mean that you're sort of making everything up and just retrofitting everything? And I'm like, nah, not really, because the archetypal combinations. You can list them out on paper. You just won't be able to predict how that archetypal combination
Exactly.
will literally show up.
Exactly.
So it's pretty amazing. But anyway, we digress. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right.
More
So
Scorpio Taurus.
I
Let's
know,
do it.
more Scorpio Taurus this month. That's it. So let's put up the real-time clock and take a look at the transits that we have chosen to focus on for the month of November. We have a couple of transits that I think take the cake. The month begins with some of these happening right away across Taurus Scorpio. Month begins with the sun opposite Jupiter, and the month begins with these two planets, Mars and Mercury, gradually working their way into an opposition with Uranus. There's also a new moon that's going to form in the sign of Scorpio opposite Uranus. So let's take a look at these transits one at a time, and then we'll sort of tell you how we're going to work with them in the horoscopes. So November 3rd, Sun opposes Jupiter across the Taurus and Scorpio axis. And then we also move to November 4th, the next day, we get a Mercury opposition to Uranus. And I'll just kind of broadly point these oppositions out. You can see all of them forming across here. So the first couple days of the month, it's Sun opposite Jupiter, Scorpio Taurus, Mercury opposite Uranus, Scorpio Taurus. We go on to November 11th, and then Mars is going to be opposite Uranus, Scorpio Taurus. On the 13th, this to me is probably the biggest transit of the month because it's a tone setter that will ring out like a bell through an entire lunation cycle. And that is, actually, let me back this up just a tiny bit so we can see the actual new moon here. But that's going to be a new moon, and the new moon will be almost exactly opposite Uranus. So here's the new moon in Scorpio, and you can see it's less than a degree off from the opposition to Uranus. Mars is just a degree off the opposition to Uranus. On the 13th, same day, Sun will oppose Uranus. So you can see why we're focusing on this, because the first half of the month and then the entire lunation cycle to follow carries the signature of Uranian opposition or Taurus Scorpio opposition, a little bit of Jupiterian opposition from the place of Scorpio. So this month is once again highlighting the Scorpio Taurus axis, and we're coming off the October 28th lunar eclipse in Taurus as well, which of course happens across the Scorpio Taurus axis. So that's why we're looking at this so closely this month. Now, as the month goes on, there are other things to talk about, but none of them as concentrated, consistent, and repetitive as the first half of the month's opposition across this axis. And again, because the new moon on the 13th hits this note, it carries it all the way into December. I mean, the entire lunation cycle will carry that original Uranian note, the karmic consequences of which will be sort of spreading out like like a bell and its sound waves moving outward. So that's why we're looking at it this month. What we're going to do is I'm not going to have any date up other than this new moon on the board, which is just a way of symbolically capturing the focus of our horoscopes for today. Let me switch back over and we will now dive into our horoscopes one sign at a time. As always, Alex and I are just going to alternate so that we can each take some time focusing on a sign and then adding commentary to each other's takes. And that's a nice way also of just like kind of divvying up the responsibilities creatively. I find that I'm like, by the time I get to Virgo, if I'm just going straight through, I'm like, I'm out of gas. So,
there's a new moon opposite Uranus. It's opposite Uranus, okay?
I know exactly. What's really nice I really appreciate carrying the cross of horoscopes with a friend. Fuck horoscopes, man. I'm just kidding.
If I can make your burden a little bit easier, Adam, it serves my purpose for being here, man.
It's like, but consistently, they're like 25,000 views for that one video, you know? So
I know.
Like, well, you got to do it.
I hear you.
Anyway, okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to start with Aries on the ascendant. This places the oppositions across the 2nd and 8th house. Remember, we're coming off from a lunar eclipse in Taurus in your 2nd house if you're in Aries rising. So the way I like to look at this axis, especially given the strong Uranian signature in the 2nd house, has to do with a liberation of assets, meaning that I want to change the nature of what I call my own, what I have, what I'm in possession of, and probably in contrast to what I owe other people or how I'm indebted, obligated to other people. So you have a lot of emphasis with Mars Uranus across this house about independence versus dependence when it comes to resources. And the Mars Uranus opposition, if you're in any kind of situation where you feel obligated to someone, the desire to break free from obligations will be especially intense for Aries folk. Now, at the same time, it could be that someone you're working with or have some kind of bond with is wanting to break free on their side of the commitment. But I could see anything from contractual to energetic, emotional, financial resources that are shared going through some period of evaluation. Do we want to keep working like this? Are you getting enough out of this? Am I getting enough out of this? How can we change the situation so that each person feels more empowered by the dynamic? That might be a more cooperative way of looking at it. But I could also see real conflicts over ownership, over rights, over possessions and objects, and also just some kind of reorientation with how we're using or valuing things that we have. So those are the main things that I'm seeing with respect to the Aries folks. You want to add anything?
I've been thinking, I was looking at this new moon through the houses of an hour ago, just like as getting ready for this. And I was thinking about the Scorpio moon opposing Uranus, Scorpio new moon, like the degeneration of things that have felt familiar, the breaking away of things that have felt familiar, that have felt safe, that have felt like they've contained us for a while. And the courage maybe with Mars there too, to really, Scorpio really incisively look honestly at things. And I think in that 8th house is really looking at, like you were saying, Adam, that the energetic exchange in whatever way I have it with others, the way I'm exchanging either money or time or even just energy with others. And with Uranus there, Uranus is a great ally in that sense of like, if it's not serving your worth, your value, if you're not feeling like you're being uplifted or at least on equal footing with another, it might be a time where Uranus just says, you know what, this is time for something to end. It might end suddenly. So you want to be mindful, I think, always with Uranus to try to, as best as possible, maybe have the idea suddenly, but implement a plan with it as well. It's a good thing it's in Taurus for that, I think. But then having a sense of like, there might be a brand new way forward you never considered. I think Uranus is fabulous for that feeling of, I never thought of that before until that transit. Like, oh my God, my mind has been illuminated. So those are some on those same themes. That's what I have with that. Yeah.
I think peripherally, it's nice to note that Venus is in her own rulership in the 7th house for Aries folks, because that might just make things a little softer and more compromising, easier to harmonize, because these transits are a little bit more contentious when it comes to like, it's mine. No, it's mine. I want this. Yeah. You want that. So that might be nice to have Venus around. Well, let's move on to Taurus. I'll hand this one over to you, and I'll highlight the axis for you as we go.
Awesome, thanks. So I think it's just generally nice to have Venus in rulership anyways. I'm just going to say that, like, I'm glad to have her there. You know, it's nice to have. And I think, all right, so let's look where I get distracted. So Taurus rising, you have the new moon in Scorpio in your 7th house. You have the opposition Uranus and Jupiter in your 1st house. I could see something here where there's been a familiar, maybe safe, emotionally contained way of being in relationship that maybe has not allowed you to explore the full range of your honest desires. Like when you really look down deep inside of yourself, things that you want to explore that you maybe haven't felt you could explore, or that weren't able to be expressed or weren't able to be talked about, that as this new moon comes through and those ideas start to move away, there's a sense with Uranus in your 1st house of your identity being able to be totally revamped, like a total, like, kind of reinvention, if that's what's at hand. Something that allows you to, through really exploring maybe in dialogue, in relationship, or the way you're relating to others, in getting in touch with what you're in your heart really looking for, or really desiring, or really wanting. There's something that maybe challenges your identity in a pretty powerful way, but also feels liberating. Like, oh, I can't believe I lived with the weight of that shame or that guilt or that secret or whatever it is for so long. And I just feel totally free now from that.
Yes. Yeah, it's great to think that relationships could be facilitating growth by exposing the Tauruses to their shadows.
Yes.
Like, you know, I did this video recently where we talked about bull from heaven or minotaur below the castle. And we were talking about the mythology of Taurus. Well, Scorpio is the minotaur below the castle in a sense. That does not mean that Scorpio is a monster. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that there's a lot that Taurus will sort of project onto Scorpio in the 7th house, let's call it, in other people that actually are part of a Taurus. You know, it's like, because Taurus is like, oh, I'm lovely, you know, I'm so lovely. Then I'm so sweet and simple and peaceful and grounded and stable and productive and healthy and happy and blah, 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 blah. Then there's this like, but I'm a control freak, possessive, lusty, you know, like, and that's like when we refuse to look at those things, they have to come up through the provocation of intimate relationships and people that somehow show it to us.
Exactly.
And so I think there's something that could be quite liberating about, you know, a tussle, an emotional tussle that comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, possession in a lot of ways, in its sort of symbolic sense, is something from the unconscious that compulses you, but you don't know why. And I think Scorpios are really good at just like boring right down to what's the essence of this, the true essence of what's going on. And there's a certain amount of freedom that comes from that usually.
Yeah, totally. Let's go on to Gemini. This places the new moon and all of the month's oppositions across the 12th and 6th house axis. And I mean, the one thing we can say for Geminis and Sagittarius who have this across that axis is like, well, at least it's pretty much over now. You know, like, oh, you know, you've, you know, it's like you got the last eclipse, you know, and at the very least, like so you got this moon cycle, but pretty soon after, Mars is moving out of your 6th. You have Jupiter, Uranus conjoining in the 12th to look forward to, which is a pretty nice way. And then in not too long, you got Uranus moving into your 1st house in the summer of 2025. So it feels to me like you're still, if you're a Gemini, you're still in it right now. There's, I mean, remember that one of the core ways of looking at the mythology of Gemini rising is that you as a person are meant to explore opposite ideas about who you are. Opposite and opposing alternating images of self. And sometimes that'll happen in and through relationships, in and through jobs, in and through courses of study, in and through, you know, clothing choices, sexual choices or identity. I mean, it's so experimental, you know. Well, one of the things that's really hard for Geminis is sometimes opposite parts of ourself that we are uncomfortable with, we try to shove them somewhere. we try to, it's like, I'm not going to look at that, so 12th and 6th house transits will come up that will be frustrating and confounding, that will bring things up from the unconscious, and that will force a Gemini to look at opposite images that are less comfortable to inhabit. Like, that's not who I'm a child of light. I don't want to look at the dark twin, that kind of thing. The 12th house in particular right now is going to be a very liberating place for you in really short time. So the advice that I would have for Geminis is like, whatever kinds of conflicts and dramas are coming up that you're having to work through, you're having to persevere through, which is a very 6th house theme, that, where sacrifice is required, where you're having to do the deep work of looking at unconscious material in your life, blind spots that you have about yourself or other people or other situations. And know that if you keep doing that work, if you keep persevering and sticking with the work, even if you're uncertain what the outcome will be, there will be this radical rebirthing it's coming very shortly. It really gets going in the spring of 2024, in April, when Jupiter and Uranus come together. That's like a foreshadowing of Uranus breaking into your 1st house, Jupiter next June going into your 1st house. So there's a lot of light coming from Geminis, and a feeling of having wrestled with something in the dark and come out feeling reborn and more capable, and like, I just earned some stripes or whatever. But you have to stick with it, and you have to be willing to persevere, sacrifice, and be willing to look at uncomfortable stuff.
And no better ally for that than Mars and Scorpio in the 6th house. Mars and its joy and its rulership, and Mars and Scorpio does not relent. It's I think that, the recognition, I think, with Geminis, it's interesting, Mercury ruled signs, is that it's this or that often with Mercury, right? I'm either this or I'm that. And I think that one of the reasons that Mercury ruled signs often want to shove the darkness away is like, if I let the darkness in, then it totally takes over. It's me. It becomes me. And I think that this Scorpio 6th house new moon is a really nice way to be like, wait a second, I can really take a look at that. I can examine it. I can get inside of it. And through doing that, I actually discovered just another aspect of myself that really wasn't that scary in the first place and isn't going to take me over. It's not going to become the bad twin that takes me over forever. And I think that Uranus really helps with that too, because Uranus just brings that, that big inhale and exhale that allows the clearing of some maybe more entrenched energy or things that have just been off in the shadows for a while.
Yeah, I love that. One other thing that popped into my mind while you were talking was the presence of Mercury in Sagittarius, where it's in its exile. And I just thought, something that, and I have Mars in Gemini, so I'm no stranger to this pattern myself. One of the things that Geminis love to do is, if there's someone in their life that's sort of close to them and I like what you're doing, but I wish it would have been my thing. So I'm going to do the opposite of what you're doing, And it's funny how, like, I've noticed, because again, Mars and Gemini, my own chart, eventually the Gemini has to come around to being like, I can do something that someone else is doing and it doesn't make me unoriginal. I don't have to do the opposite thing just to be opposite. And like, I feel like there might be a little bit of frustration in the air right now with other people, and the tendency to want to polarize yourself in relation to other people. But I would look very carefully at the shadow of what you actually love or admire, or how you might be alike someone rather than different from them. That might be something to consider. Just because it's a Gemini tendency doesn't mean that this will be happening for everyone, but it's something to think about.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
All right, let's move on to Cancer rising. And we'll look at the 5th and 11th.
Great. So you've got, for my Cancer rising, you have, this is interesting. So you have a new moon in Scorpio conjunct Mars in your 5th house, opposing Uranus and Jupiter in your 11th house. So I actually really see this as I'm really going to stop caring what other people think about what brings me happiness, joy, pleasure. I'm going to, I could see Uranus in the 11th house here being something that sort of shakes up a friend group or shakes up a social situation or a social group in some way, where it's like, I haven't liked either feeling judged, or feeling like I can't fully be myself, or feeling like I can't express myself well. And that in Scorpio and the fifth house, there's like a personal boring into what really makes me happy and creatively fulfilled, what really brings me pleasure, and a less of a sense of I don't have to stay fixed in this sort of pleasing Venusian way in the 11th house in Taurus of what will make others happy or make me, sort of seem simple and nice and wonderful and all these things that we could associate with Taurus. There's a sense of, again, a liberation, but really around like what brings me fulfilling personal pleasure, and allowing myself to be liberated by Uranus from like, places or situations, groups, networks that maybe don't appreciate that, or you haven't been able to fully express it.
I'm thinking of, my wife who's a Cancer rising, and she's, you guys know, a lot of people here know Ashley. She has been thinking since we moved to Minnesota, and Uranus has been ingressing into her 11th house. It was just pretty fresh into her 11th when we moved to Minnesota. So a lot of this has been about new social, professional, social groups and professional groups in a new location. One of the things that she has been working on is patience with the process of finding the right community and the right people, and, like slowly letting it develop and build, and making sure that you're doing so as you're simultaneously taking steps in the right personal direction creatively. So it's like, I find the right people as I also find my own creative footing in a new environment. You can't just find the people to fit an old idea of who you were. You find the right people or spaces or communities or friends because you're finding the new person that you are in the new space, as much as you find the people and they also help you establish who the new you is. So it's this kind of conversation. And she's been reflecting on the back and forth between that lately. And I've been like, it's your eclipses going back and forth across that house axis.
Exactly.
And it's also like big new creative directions that are emerging for Cancers right now.
Yeah.
Deep, intense.
Yeah.
New, it's like the fifth house, for example, is like, okay, imagine how your life is going to change if you're having your first baby or something. Like, okay, well, we're gonna take my whole life is going to change. Now I'm going to start to be friends with more of the people in my crowd who are moms or something like that. So you think about how Cancers right now are going through this creative and social awakening, and the two are shaping each other cooperatively. That's how I would look at it.
Yeah, I love that.
All right, let's go on to it's always fun when we get to Leo, because is it Taurus and Leo, then we know exactly what to say.
I know exactly what's gonna happen.
our own rising signs. Okay, so
go Adam, tell me my life. Tell me.
I know. Dear Leo. There's only two signs that get a dear before it. It's Cancer and Leo. Exactly. Dear Cancer, dear Leo. So we have the new moon forming in the 4th house, opposite the Jupiter and Uranus, especially Uranus in the 10th. In my opinion, for Leos, a lot of this you have two ways that this could go. There's like kind of an emphasis on some kind of deeper emotional magic and chaos happening around home, family, roots, living environment. Like it's the kind of period, especially with the eclipses that we've had. And so you could be coming off a time in your life where you've moved, you've relocated, you've moved in with a lover, your mom has died. It could be really intense, deep transformational stuff happening around the kind of resting place of your life, the home and domestic sphere. On the other hand, I think that this could be the kind of thing where if there's been a lot that's stewing unconsciously around these subjects, but nothing has happened yet, we finally are coming to the end of a long cycle. And then you see, especially the Mars-Uranus opposition coming after the lunar eclipse in Taurus and stuff like that things are ready to pop somehow. Yeah. This is actually the time where the move occurs, or that, and it's funny because you think, well, maybe I've been through a year and a half of Scorpio eclipses in the 4th house. For some of you, a lot's probably already happened if you're a Leo rising. But for another good portion of people, it will actually be this very tail end of the process that creates the most transformation, because sometimes the Scorpio is about build, 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 blow. You know, and so, you know, you have to watch that kind of eruptive volcanic energy around home, family, parents, living environment, dealing with things that have been brewing but are now ready to pop, because Mars opposite Uranus will, at a new moon, will sort of make it do that within the cycle ahead. I also wonder, though, about the juxtaposition between, you know, your public facing self and your inner or private world if you're a Leo rising. There's a lot of emphasis right now on a kind of a transformation of career that looks pretty victorious, like especially by April when Jupiter and Uranus get together. For Leos, I think this is a breakthrough. You know, you're going to another level. Your reach is further, or your platform or your position is going to be better suited or more creative or maybe more rewarding somehow. You're taking a big leap. That's Jupiter Uranus is like, just leap, don't look, just leap. So there's something like that happening for Leos in terms of their public facing self, their calling, their work. But it's also happening as you're having to reconcile with this deep, you know, kind of deep, dark, watery energy around the roots. That's how I'm seeing it right now. But you're our official Leo rising. So what do you see?
Well, I see all of that. That's all happening. You know, it's been a really, really wild ride with that fourth house, 10th house thing. I think that, you know, what I've discovered personally is there's a sense of the really coming to terms with the truth of some of the more private spheres in my own life. I'm going to speak for myself here, but really some of the deeper, more private spaces in my own life that have allowed me to sort of put the past behind me to shoot off to where I want to go in my career. And I think that there was a lot of fear of what if people knew, what if people saw, what if people this, right? There was a lot of hiding that was going on that I'm discovering as I release that in the 4th house, especially around sort of an ancestry and all these things. I feel so liberated and excited about going off to new heights as my own self in my career. And I think that there's, it is a very victorious feeling that Jupiter at the top of the chart, Jupiter and Uranus up there, is just a sense of like, I have gone through, I have slain the dragons, I have found the ring, I have thrown the ring in the volcano, I have got Darth Vader, I got, who else did I need? You know, go down the list of all the villains I got. And now I rocket ship off somewhere else. And it is, you know, just around home too. I've had a lot of stuff where I'm just refiguring my home situation and what I'm going to do with my home and upcoming, especially in the next 6 months. Am I going to live here? Am I going to live somewhere else? And so that's all been coming up too, just in the external look of the astrology too. Yeah.
Yep. Let's move it. Whoops. Here we go. Let's move it along to Virgo. And let's see here. Let me draw the axis out. So we've got 3rd and 9th house. Oh, we got not the big arrow, but a slightly bigger one.
It's okay. We can't always.
it's like the big arrow was like, okay, I heard you, so I'm toning it down like a little.
I'm still on a cigarette break, so you can have this one. Deal with this.
Okay.
Oh man! All right. So I like this transit a lot for Virgo rising. You have the Scorpio transits and new moon in your 3rd house. You have Jupiter Uranus in your 9th house. This seems to me to be like kind of a this actually seems kind of exciting that, you know, if you felt in your environment that surrounds you every day, whether it's your mental environment or your sort of neighborhood, your home environment, the things that you're sort of familiar with, and there might be a sense of like as the familiarity of that is moving away somehow or being transformed somehow, there's this real opportunity towards a whole new set of an expansive set of spiritual beliefs, maybe even a lot of travel, a feeling of like not being rooted in the same place or same environment all the time, but maybe like a sense where there's an exploration or an experimentation in location that wants to come up around this or during this cycle. And just, you know, with that ninth house, I think it always comes to me with like a Uranus there, like a reordering of philosophies or the studying of philosophies, or maybe the study of, I don't know, maybe a study of astrology or something you maybe never thought you would actually study or go into. There's a liberation that comes where it's like, well, why couldn't I? Why couldn't I do that? Why couldn't I move off in that less familiar direction?
I love that. One of the things that came to my mind was, how does a scientific or spiritual or religious revolution occur? You know, whether it's Galileo or like Luther, you know, in the Protestant movement or whatever. Those are the examples that come to my mind. There are probably others in every part of the world. One of the things that I think happens is like the ecosystem, the everyday mind is disturbed, not necessarily in a bad way. It's just like it's agitated or it's shaken up because something new enters the environment. So like, okay, here's a good example. If you think about in the history of astrology, how does astrology as a system, a ninth house kind of thing, astrology belonged to the ninth house traditionally, how does it evolve or change? Well, one of the ways it evolves or changes is it is somehow passed into the hands of a new culture. Arab, Persian, Indian, you know, Greek, Latin, you know, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Islam, whatever, different religions, different cultures. So when they carry the thing, astrology is now in a different environment. And the environment starts slowly commenting on, reflecting on, adding to, subtracting to the system until somehow there's a revolution and the system sort of breaks and becomes something different. And I think that that is a third ninth house dynamic. Right? So the third house is like your everyday. Well, in this case, for Virgos, let's put it this way. You're in the midst of a revolution of your belief system, of your way of seeing the universe or the world or God or whatever. But it's really, I would think April when Jupiter hits Uranus again. That's going to be a really big moment. But right now is a great cycle for the seeds of that revolution to be planted by something in the environment that serves to start agitating the larger structure in a very everyday kind of way. You know, if you're suddenly, for example, if you work in an environment that has no light, no plants, no colors, and then suddenly you're placed into an environment that has window light coming in and plants and colors, you get happier slowly and gradually. You go, wow, I'm happier. How is that? You don't even put it together that it's windows, plants, and colors every day. There's something very everyday and subtle and deep, and maybe it's a little bit more obvious because of the Mars-Uranus signature in your environment that is going to stimulate a larger change in the months to come, and you'll really feel it in April.
Oh, I love that. You know, you think about too, if you think for like the scientific revolution, or just even like, you know, the whole rediscovery of the heliocentric, you know, the solar system. That's something that seems very scorpionic too, in the sense of like, this is something we take for granted now, but it altered from a very small shift in perception the entire view of the universe at that time.
Yeah.
But it was right there, and they had us, you know, those scientists were up against a lot of pushback against that at that time. So you had that Scorpio sort of determination with that as well.
Yeah.
You know,
something even that's being subtly called into question, right? That you think like, well, I mean, I don't know if that's a thing or whatever. And then 6 months from now, it's like, well, that was a thing, you know?
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
All right. So here we are. We're going across and there it is.
There it is. Back to the cigarette break.
I'll just tell you, I did that one. I just wanted to bring it out.
Oh, Adam.
Look, you know, it's the funniest thing because I have no idea how this happens. I use this thing called Epic Pen. And when I select the arrow, like sometimes it just appears huge. But I think that was the first time that it ever was like, well, I'm one of the bigger ones, but not the biggest. You know, so I was like, oh, it's okay. You can come. I'll let you come out, you know?
Love it.
All right.
God.
Second and eighth house. Oh, is this me? No, this is me.
Oh, okay, that's you.
Yeah, no, it's me. Sorry, my bad.
Okay.
Because I always forget. I was like looking at Libra and I was like, it's Alex's turn. No, it's mine. I started with Aries. So second and eighth house again. And the same thing I would say that I said for the Aries folks, which is that you're looking at a process around resources. The difference is that there's something with Jupiter and Uranus moving toward conjunction in your 8th house by April, and I'm mentioning this for like almost every sign, you're looking at a liberation, awakening, revolution, greater freedom, more possibilities coming through the house that, properly speaking, belongs to it's like other people's stuff. So I would see this as a time where you have to be open to the magic that other people might bring. Whereas the Scorpio energy in the 2nd house might be more suspicious, maybe even a little bit paranoid, withholding, withdrawing, holding cards close, not wanting the help of someone or something else, being a little distrusting or suspicious. I think at least one major possibility here is that what we're looking at is a moon cycle that's testing your ability to actually receive something of substance from other people. Whereas you may want to say no for some reason that's you should look at. Now, on the other hand, I would just say plainly, 2nd, 8th house, you might be dealing with conflicts around assets, money, resources, and the need to realign those kinds of soul contracts, let's call them, or karmic contracts. You may be needing greater emotional independence. There may be some need to free yourself up from obligations or commitments that aren't working, especially where there's an exchange of energy and expectations. So broadly speaking, the same things applied that we said for Aries rising. But in particular, because the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in the 8th is moving toward, it's a very positive transit that combination, even just Jupiter in the 8th house, will often bring really wonderful benefits and blessings that other people give you. Sometimes those come with expectations. There may be some hesitation about getting into something like that, but I think we're also, for Scorpios, it's like you're warming up to other people having something of tremendous value to give that you can actually trust. The reason I say that too is because the North Node in your chart right now as a Libra is in the 7th house. That points toward relationships, and you take the ruler of that at this time in Scorpio in your 2nd house, and you think about the conflict you might be feeling around other people's involvement in your things, right? And so there could be some conflict or tension there. The same time with Venus and Libra in your 1st house, I think, again, that's a soft spot that I mentioned for Aries folks too, where there might be some greater grace or ease or flexibility that you're able to find to move through things rather than being too standoffish or like distrusting. Personally, as someone with 3 planets in Libra, I feel like Librans sometimes have a hard time accepting help because that, in some way, for Libras, it would like tip the social calculus.
Yeah. And then there's the feeling sometimes of owing. Like I have a Libra moon, so it's like, well, if I accept the help now, I have to evenly give back immediately what I received because now it's out of balance. That's been a huge lesson for me over the years with the Libra moon.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. All right, Scorpio rising. Oh, the big Aries. I just love that. All right, so Scorpio risings. I see this as a very body-based transit in a lot of ways. With the moon, the new moon. And is that the new arrow cursor?
Is that good? I didn't write it. It just showed up.
Oh my God, I feel like it's skywriting for me. Like, Adam.
Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
You didn't have to do that. I was like, what the hell is that cursor thing?
Okay.
Well, Scorpio rising. We'll stop being silly now because it's Scorpio rising. No silliness for that. But
they'll get angry. So
they'll get angry. That's what you have to focus. So we have a new moon opposing Uranus in your 1st house. I think this is very body based. I think that this is something around like identity, body psychology that is maybe the inception of something. Even this might sound like a contradiction, but the inception of something that is being either broken down or taken away, not necessarily always in terms of your health. So, but something that like is being that is degenerating in some way to be rebuilt in another and through relationship. And it's just like we were saying with Libra, like the emphasis, the gravity well or the pull for Scorpios and Libras right now is to that North Node to Jupiter Uranus towards others, the other side of the chart. And I think that there's something here in your relationships that might a freedom in relationship, or a feeling of freedom in relationship, maybe a desire for freedom in relationship. I always think with Uranus in the 7th house, you just want to always check like the desire for freedom versus the actual need for freedom, those sorts of ideas. But some breath of fresh air and newness and freshness and experimentation that comes around the idea of relationships with Uranus that allows you to maybe pierce through to another layer of your psyche, or work through another layer of your emotional realm, or maybe even just helps you become like, I don't know, there's a detox or a workout routine you go through in your body that help you regenerate your body and your mind, your identity in some way. But coming from the freedom, or the big breath that happens in that 7th house with Uranus.
Yeah, I like that. The only thing I would add is just that, again, there's a huge breakthrough coming in the spring, in April, with Jupiter and Uranus in the 7th house, a place of relationships, a place that, I love the Indian philosophical categories given to the 4 angular houses. So you think of Dharma in the 1st house, Kama in the 7th. The 1st house, the weightiness of the new moon in the 1st house is all about Dharma. It's like, who am I? What am I doing? What do I represent? What adequately, whether it's clothing or attitude or behavior or anything else, it's like, does it reflect who I am or who I'm becoming? And sort of the management even of the body there's a sense of like, is my health or my body reflective of something essential about who I am? So it's very serious, self-serious in a way. Now, the 7th house is more like, an invitation to go dancing with someone and to have a glass of wine and to, maybe go to bed with your lover. It has there's such an emphasis on like letting go and of like ecstasy. And so I wonder about how much of oneself in any rising and setting signs, but especially for Scorpio right now, how much of oneself can you like access in what can you really do to refine who you are if you aren't also experiencing the loss of self in the ecstasy or love or intimacy of another? It's like, I don't think you can do it. And I think that's the point of them being opposed, right? In Bhakti yoga, which of course I was really into for a couple of years, and it's still like philosophically, I still identify with Bhakti yoga, which is just the yoga of devotion, right? So I'm a very devotional person in the way I do astrology, and everything is very devotional for me. It's, I think, probably Cancerian a little bit or something. But in Bhakti, it's like, well, you can't develop a personal relationship with the divine in a vacuum. Your personal relationship with the divine comes in and through your most intimate relationships with your lover, your friends, your children, your parent. I mean, everything, right? And so it's like relationship becomes the vehicle for self unfolding or growth or whatever. And I think that it's harder for a fixed water sign like Scorpio that's so, like I think actually, I'll just use Hilda because she's a good example. I think you can see her laying on the floor back there. She's passed out.
Oh, sweetie.
Got her little crock in the mouth. Yeah. So, she's like the quintessential, she's a mastiff. She's like a quintessential guardian dog.
Yeah.
And like, what I love is when there are no squirrels visible, no Amazon people dropping a package off, and she has temporarily forgotten the very serious duty of killing anything that tries to come into the house, and she just sort of chills out. And then she becomes so many other things. She becomes a playful dog, a curious dog, a tricky, all these different parts of her character come out when she's dropped out of the instinctual programming of like guardianship, which is like her job. So it's important that she have it. But and you know what? She's a Scorpio. She was born in Scorpio season. So I always think about that with her because I'm like, it's like Scorpio. It's a good analogy for Scorpio in general. It's like how much of who you are meant to become has to be explored in spaces that are relaxed, where you're not having that like super defensive emotional radar for bullshit or predators or instability or whatever. So I think that there's a lot of that kind of tension in the air right now for Scorpios. And I suspect that there will be a big invitation to like chill out and tap into the ecstasy piece by the spring. And some of that might be brewing right now.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking too, how much of our sense of self is formed by our reflection from others.
Mm-hmm.
And that, Scorpios that are such an involuted sign that looks so much recognizing that when others will reflect to you and see you, it's safe to let them do that. That's so much, even in our early development, like, your girls are in that age too, where, they need to see you guys reflecting back their emotions and stuff like that. Like, there's such a sense of like allowing yourself to be seen and reflected back by another in ways, and with Uranus there might really break open some really powerful places.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, it's really interesting because speaking of a Mars ruled sign in the first house, my daughter has Mars in the first house. My younger, and like when she's really, really seen, and let's say she's being creative or she's singing and no one's there, and I come in and I go, oh my God, look, you're singing. I love it. She gets so angry, just like, no, you didn't see it. Like, I did it. I love it. And now you can't push me away. I love it when you sing, whatever. And it's like, it's so funny because I'm like, that's a Mars in the first house kind of deal where it's like, I don't want to be seen because I feel vulnerable.
Yes.
So, but I mean, I'm like, well, at least she was born into, I guess, I mean, I keep thinking like, well, at least she was born into a family with people who are going to be like, no, we love what we see,
Exactly.
But not everyone gets that mirroring and we do need it.
No. Yeah, we do. It's really essential for us.
Let's go on to Sagittarius. Remind me that I have something to say about the Lord of the Rings with Capricorn, if I forget.
Oh, please. We got to bring them all in. It's been so long since we got to Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or anything.
Dude, that was so like desperate and sincere. Oh, God. Please do talk about Lord of the Rings.
Oh, I need to hear it.
Well, my daughter, I showed my youngest the Mars in the first house. Not surprisingly, by the way, after I showed her Star Wars, we happened to get her, a friend of ours got her a sword, like a plastic, not plastic, I don't know what it is, like a foam, it's like a Nerf sword.
Yeah.
And now she's like lightsabering and, so. Okay, well, Sagittarius, we have same kind of themes that Gemini had. This is, for Sag, okay, here's the thing I like to say about Sag rising and the mythology of Sag rising. You have the darkest time of the year sliding into the return of the light. And for the centaur in mythology, here's the kind of stories that I frequently hear. In fact, I had 2 or 3 clients in the past week that were Sag risings that all had like a very similar story. I grew up in an environment that robbed me of my sense that the universe is a good, safe, faithful, benevolent place. And my life work is to restore some sense that the cosmos is good, just, beautiful, intelligent. And I can either be the like angry, destructive centaur that's nihilistic and was like wounded, or through work and through reclaiming a healthy form of faith, whatever that looks like, I can be like Chiron. I can be wise. I can be a sagely wise centaur who has the background of the darkness and the sort of like reckless, hedonistic, free-spirited, wild, fuck you, I don't believe in anything. There's just kind of this like intense nihilism with Sagittarius.
Oh yeah.
But then there's this turn that many Sag risings make to restore order to the universe, starting with themselves. And that's like such a there's a lot of Sagittarian stories, but like that's a big one. And I would just say that right now for Sagittarians, when you have a lot of Scorpio stuff cooking in your 12th house, you're looking at either, a new layer to the wounding. It's like, okay, well, I thought I had processed some of the stuff that was very disillusioning earlier in my life, but now I'm revisiting it in a new way. But, there's someone in my family, I won't mention names, but there's someone in my family who, as these transits have been occurring in the 12th house, has been checking out a 12-step program and rediscovering a faith that was lost. That partially, I think, pushed them into 12th house stuff, if that makes sense. Lost their faith, go right into the shadows of the darkness of the 12th Sag rising. You can a lot of the 12th house has to do with looking at the layers and layers of the hurt, the trauma, the pain, and then coming to terms with it. And that's a painful process, but ultimately a very redemptive one. It goes along very nicely with the mission of many Sag rising stories. So I look at this and I say, yeah, you could be dealing with some stuff right now, but you have a choice. Are you, as stuff is coming up, maybe it's old stuff, maybe it's new stuff, are you choosing to look at it in terms of the redemption storyline? How do I restore order to my personal universe? How do I restore faith or wisdom? I like in 12-step programs, they say the God of my understanding. It's a phrase that's used. Like, because not everyone has the same idea about what a higher power is or what you call it or whatever. But it's like, what is the higher power in your life? That you have some sense of hope that you can do better than what you're doing, and that hope rests in something in the universe that could help restore health or happiness or whatever. That's a higher power that you could say. Even astrology, just looking and saying, will there be better times ahead? You're trusting that the universe has seasons that might lift you up. That's a higher power of your understanding. I think that Sages right now have the opportunity to either become more destructive, more reckless, dive deeper into a feeling of chaos and loss and so forth. Or you can look at what's happening and say, is this providing me an opportunity to surrender and put my faith in something bigger? That's one way that I would really, really look at this. And I think that when you see Jupiter and Uranus coming together in April in that 6th house, I think to myself, this is a time where if you've been putting in the work, Jupiter, Uranus click in the 6th, and it's like the sacrifice pays off. There's a sense of having climbed a mountain, or having, if you've put in the work, you'll be in some ways rewarded by what Jupiter and Uranus will bring, which is probably a wave of hope and kind of a redemptive storyline.
Oh, I love that. I love all of that. I'm identifying a lot of that as a Sag sun. There's a lot in that for me. And I think that, it's interesting. I just read, my partner just bought for me the Song of Achilles, which I really, really loved. And there's a whole scene with Chiron in that, where Chiron is mentoring Achilles and Patroclus. And you get the sense with Chiron and the way she writes, and of course, the fictional writing of it, this sense of like the centaur who has been through some serious shit, but has devoted himself to mentoring and healing and guidance and wisdom. And I think that there's something here where one of the things as a Sag sun I can say is one of the places I have healed the most is when I have been mentored and then I mentor, or I have been taught and then I teach. I learn something and then I teach it. And I think that, there's a phrase that's coming up here that's from the tapas acupressure technique. My therapist used to use it as kind of a way of releasing some trauma from the energy system. And the phrase is, it happened, it's over, I can relax, I can heal, I can move on. And there is a sense where if you can get to that point, or at least the seed is maybe planted for that point, there's a point where what you're learning now, you will feel a sense of redemption and hope and joy as in that Jupiter generosity, as you give it, as you teach it out. And I think the Jupiter ruled signs, it really helps with Jupiter ruled signs. And it's helped me a lot. I was really identifying with what you were saying, Adam, a lot.
Yeah. I think a little bit with Sages right now too, about Saturn being in another Jupiter ruled sign in their angular 4th house. And just that what you're processing right now has history, right? It's just that Saturn, that kind of weightiness of Saturn down at the roots. It's like, what you're processing is personal, but there's reasons for this that dig down into the well, that come from the ancestry. Anyway, it's again, for Sages, one of the things that I love is that there is you've got Uranus gradually working its way out of the 6th and into the 7th. And I think that, in short time, there's also going to be some really magical relationships in the next couple of years that start coming into the lives of Sagittarians that can just also help redeem or restore anything that's been broken. Uranus has this way of just really exciting and awakening things. Let's go on to Capricorn. And I didn't forget, once you're done, I'm going to add something about Lord of the Rings.
I could let you start if it's going to be Lord of the Rings, Adam. I don't mind handing it off.
No, you go, and then I'll just add my little thought in at the end.
All All right, I'm going to resist the urge to start quoting here, and I'm just going to go with the astrology. All right, so here we go. So each of us minister in our own time. So what do we do? You have, all right, so Capricorns. I don't want to mess around with my Capricorns. Stay on point. You have Scorpio new moon in your 11th house, and you have the Jupiter, Uranus, and the oppositions in your 5th house. This is an interesting one for Caps. I think like with, you know, I'm looking also at Venus in Libra at the top of your chart. I see this as a kind of rebalancing in some ways of the things that have the 11th house that supports your career, supports your public facing image in the world, how you're sort of perceived and go into the world. There's a sense of really digging down into the networks that you've created, or, you know, the social groups and the friends that you have, digging down and being like, who's really truly got my back here, and is there a sense of is there a rebalancing that's happening, or harmonizing that's happening in terms of career because of that? I just, that Venus keeps calling my eye. Like there's a sense of like Venus coming into Libra now after all that activity that's gone on through the eclipses and Mars, and sort of tying things back together. But with that new moon in your 11th house, there's a sense of a new phase where it's a deeper, maybe more authentic, maybe more true to you feeling of your social connections that also feeds into a rebirth, a refreshment of your personal sense of pleasure, joy, and fun. You know, when I work with Cap risings a lot, Adam, we talk a lot about the unique ways Capricorns find fun. Like it's not always like going out to a bar and, you know, dancing on the table. Sometimes it's like I want to read my book about something very intense and important that strikes me in some way. And I feel like Uranus here.
What else do they like? No, I'm just kidding. Let's make a list.
Big stack of books to read and then tell other people they read it. Look at this imposing series of books I read.
Yeah,
Ancient Greek tax law. You know, you're like, hey man, you know, if that's fun, you know, there's a sense here. Again, you know, we were talking about this with Cancer risings too, of like, what really brings you, you know, what really brings you fun? Now with Uranus in your 5th house, I think, and Jupiter there, that also is another way of saying to Caps, it's okay to relax, enjoy, experiment, the things you never thought you would do, or I would never. Like there might be a little bit of, but would I never? I don't know, you know. And there's a really nice, I love Uranus in the 5th house for that. There's a real sense of exploration, and just like, you're allowed to experience pleasure. You're allowed to experience fun. You're allowed to experience things that are out of the box, spontaneous, those sorts of ideas.
Yeah. And now my point about Lord of the Rings.
Finally.
Just get to it. No, that was great. I really like that. And what I would say is that so recently, I taught a class and I was talking about Cap rising, and I was mentioning that one of the Cap rising myths that will shape the character development of an individual born with Cap rising is that of carrying a cross. The cross is not yours, doesn't belong to you. It came from someone or something else, but somehow it's fallen to you, just like the ring. You have to carry it. And the thing is that you have to, not only do you have to carry it, which is in and of itself hard, but you have to make sure that you are not corrupted by the thing you carry. And a lot of the times for Caps, that'll come in the form of bad father karma. Like that'll be one that's a very stereotypical, but it could be a lot of other things. This is like Liz Green talks about earth father karma. So it's like, it's different than like sky father. It's earth father karma. It's the weighty, sort of burdensome biological, genetic, psychological matrix of stuff that you often, somehow it falls to you to carry. You know, it's like the weight of the world as an earthy thing. And Caps will have to carry that without becoming like the thing that they carry. So just like Frodo in the Lord of the Rings, right? So anyway, this person in my class who is one of my favorite students because she's been in all the programs for a long time, and I really like what she has to say about astrology. She was like, I felt like you were kind of like, it felt like, we didn't give credit for like the joyfulness of like what's the like positive side of Capricorn. So I said, well, think about, I responded, I said, well, Capricorns are actually like hobbits. In many ways, the hobbit is like an innocent country dwelling child,
Yes.
and
Yes.
the ring falls to them, so this type of individual, because it falls to Bilbo, it falls to Frodo, but it falls to a hobbit to carry this thing. And that's the thing, is that Capricorns are in that sense childlike. And we forget that. We forget that the polar opposite sign is Cancer, which people are like, oh, it's such a sweet, but actually Capricorn is the same thing. It just has to retain that same kind of Cancerian essence while carrying something that can make it feel like they're a hard, cold person. And what happens to Frodo? He starts off as a very jolly hobbit and who likes his tea and his comforts, very much like a Cancer who loves their home. But then he has to go out on the road and he has to carry this weighty ring. And as he goes along progressively, it becomes darker and heavier, and the joy is sucked out, and the landscape becomes bleaker, and he becomes more and more like the ring. And one of the great Capricornian features of that story is that he can't do it alone. He has to do it with the help of a friend, with the help of others. So the reason that I was thinking about this is because when you see that really the biggest, brightest thing happening for Caps is a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in the 5th house, place of joy, happiness, lightheartedness, creative fulfillment, and that there's a much weightier series of themes in the 11th house. For Capricorns, knowing that this is their psychology, I think to myself, okay, well, you have to make sure that you're not that there might be parts of what you have to carry that require you to be around people that are heavy to be around. Colleagues, coworkers, corporate environments, whatever, collections of friends you've developed along the way that give you some resilience because they're carrying heavy stuff. But you have to make sure that the people you're surrounding yourself with, as necessary as they may be, are not keeping you from this childlike, innocent, joyful, creative part of you that actually you have to tend to if you're going to carry this thing successfully to the end.
Oh, yes. Preach.
Yeah. You got to have the right people. You got to have some joyful people too. You got to have some happy, lighthearted people, that kind of thing.
And Samwise in Lord of the Rings makes it pretty much to Mordor with that attitude. Yeah. Pretty much. He gets there. He has that levity, the support, I'm not the one carrying this, but I see the weight that it's putting on you, but I can give you a little nudge every once in a while and be like, it's okay.
Yes.
We're going to get through this. That sort of idea. Yeah.
This is the funny part. So the student I was explaining this, and I thought it was a great explanation. She goes, yeah, but I just feel sort of disrespected in being compared to a hobbit because they're not serious enough for like a Capricorn. And I was like, you know what though? That's exactly what a fucking hobbit would say. That's exactly what a hobbit would say. They would be like, I don't like that I'm not being taken seriously. Like they're actually like, if you think about hobbits, they're actually sort of, they're very country, sweet, innocent, jovial, but they're also real cranky. They like things exactly the way that they like them and must be taken seriously. Yep. And it's that exact little complex that makes them just serious enough to carry it,
Oh, absolutely. And I think we forget a lot of times with Capricorn too about the sensualness of Capricorn. It's a yin sign that we get very stuck on the sort of the goat the mountain rather than the enjoyment, albeit maybe in a very fixed way, the enjoyment of the simple pleasures. This is an earth sign, of the earth, of the things that just bring pleasure. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, totally. So what's interesting is that Tolkien was a Capricorn.
I could see that.
So there's a lot of Capricorn and a lot of Saturn in Lord of the Rings. And I just think that like it makes sense. I think he had the Capricorn sun in the 5th house too, which is kind of perfect for what we're looking at. But anyway, so I thought you might like that because I was thinking about it in advance and I was like, I think Alex is going to like this one.
Yes, we haven't either Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. You're always welcome to bring up as many examples as you would like.
Totally. Well, my 5-year-old's like, we haven't watched Empire Strikes Back yet, and she's 5, and I'm like, oh, sweetie, I don't know if you want to go down that dark path.
Yeah. Once you begin down the dark path, forever will dominate your destiny.
I know, dude. I'm like, but she's game. She's like, I can do it. I'm like, yeah, you have Mars in the first house. I know you can. Let's saddle up. We're gonna do it.
Yeah.
Oh, there magically
there
we're back to the.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah,
it's got
okay.
Opinions.
Is this me? Is this you?
This is you. No, wait.
Okay.
No, Capricorn. I just talked for so long that I thought it was my turn. That's my problem. Let's see. So
take it, Vader.
So we have the new moon in Scorpio. This is for Aquarians in your 10th house opposite Uranus and Jupiter. Now, we said something very similar for Leos, which is that we see an emphasis on the dichotomy between the public-facing part of you and the private sphere. So you get just classic like work stuff and home stuff coming up at the same time. The revolution of Jupiter and Uranus in April in your 4th house is really about providing you with a different kind of space for pleasure, relaxation, comfort, escape, release. Sometimes that will coincide with people passing, because sometimes you don't feel like you can fully rest while the ghosts of certain ancestral people or their energies or karmas are like entangled with your own. It's surprising to me how frequently Jupiter through the 4th house will bring about a more stable base, because ancestors depart. And when they depart, they leave their blessings, and their curses are in some ways dissolved. And that's the joy of Jupiter in the 4th house. So Jupiter Uranus could change your ancestral family pattern in some way, or even just your living environment, or something about how you take or find rest. And I think that's where everything's heading for Aquarians. For Aquarians, this also means that, your sweet spot is to find the earth. Something that happened for me, as I have Aquarius in my 10th, something that happened for me when Saturn went through Aquarius in my 10th house. This was like a big learning experience for me. I realized that one of the reasons why I'm an astrologer is because I tend to climb up some invisible ladder in my head and look at everything from this like 20,000 foot engineering perspective. It's very astrological, but it is also just about trying to see the big picture and plan and see everything from this big macroscopic point of view. And basically what happened while Saturn was going through my 10th house is I realized that if I do that too often, it exhausts me. It dissociates me, for one thing, but dissociation after a while is exhausting, because the body is like the scaffolding that you're climbing up, right? So it's like I'm climbing this ladder that is my body to look out some periscope at the top of my head, and my body's supporting me doing that all the time, but it's getting neglected because I'm supporting something, but I'm not coming down and supporting what's supporting. I'm not. So that was like this big thing for me while Saturn was in my 10th house in Aquarius. That eventually led me to saying I can't be in a religious tradition that emphasizes a lot of transcending of the body.
Yeah.
Right. I just like, that is really harming me, actually.
Yeah.
So I had to climb back down into like my biosuit, in the earth. And that's Taurus in the 1st, my body, with Aquarius in the 10th. But it's not much different when you have Aquarius in the 1st and you have Taurus in the 4th, because the 4th is called moksha, which means liberation. What does liberation look like for an Aquarius whose body tends to be more identified with that climbing up the scaffolding thing? It looks like getting back into your body. That's where you find the freedom. So the freedom I see for Aquarians coming, especially as Pluto's entering your 1st house. Pluto is primordial. It's not it's, you know what I mean? It's deep.
Instinctual. It's instinctual. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's so interesting you say that, Adam, because, when I do energy work with people, and you'll see people who tend to be very Aquarian, air sign ruled in a lot of ways, their vital energy is usually way up in their head. They're very in their head in a lot of ways, and their mental activity eats up a lot of energy. And so it's that re-embodiment. It's also powering your body in a lot of
Yes.
ways and bringing health back to your body, of like letting your prana, your chi, your vital energy move back down all the way down into your feet. And it's, I mean, Taurus here, one of the signs that often represents embodiment, the body at the base of your chart with Jupiter there, nice kind of weighted Jupiter sitting there. That's a really beautiful way of describing that. I love that. And I think it's also setting up too, with the Scorpio new moon, I just can't stop looking at Pluto in the 12th house, finishing up the 12th house for you guys and moving into the first, because I feel like there's a reordering of how you're perceived both from your first house and from your 10th house, a sort of deeper look inside of your more, in like we were saying, instinctual primordial power in a lot of ways. That's not necessarily based on the rational intellect. It's much deeper than that.
Yeah, I mean, if we think back to Capricorn, the Pluto and Capricorn exiting the 12th house for Aquarians, it's sort of like, well, you made it to Mordor, you dropped the ring into the pit, and now, what does the new world look like? Which is also the new you. Because as Pluto moves into the first, it's sort of like the ring quest is over, and now it's like, well, what does Middle Earth look like? What ideas will preside over or bring forth the new birth?
It's actually one of my favorite parts of Lord of the Rings is after the ring is dropped in, that whole part, geniusly written part of what's the aftermath of that.
Yeah.
How do you now inhabit that world that's seen that happen? Yeah.
And for Aquarians, they might be on the ship with the elves too. You never know.
Exactly.
So, all right. Last but not least, you've got Pisces.
All right, Pisces. So we have the Scorpio new moon in your 9th house. We have the Jupiter and Uranus in your 3rd house. I could see this as one of the things I think that's important for Pisces, and this actually is related, I think, to Saturn moving into your 1st house too, is it's okay to be aware of darker, more subterranean, maybe more challenging aspects of the way you might see the world. And I see that as this new moon. The way you put the world together may not always have this sort of the sheen on it that Pisces often like to have. That there are realities in the world and in the way we put the world together that often can be quite challenging to look at. But you have, I think, I just keep seeing Mars and Scorpio here as an ally in that regard. That there's a way of sort of digging down, boring down into your belief system to see. Is your belief system based on something that, kind of feels good, feels nice, looks nice, or is it really, does it have a solid basis in something that feels true to you, authentic, resonant, deep? And that could bring some big shifts and changes just around your everyday world in this 3rd house with Uranus there. And I like that Jupiter's co-present with Uranus, and as we've been saying, Adam's been saying, Jupiter is going to make a conjunction with Uranus next year. Jupiter tends to bring the better angels, unless it's really jacked up. And I think that there's a real sense of, in the 3rd house here, this ability to reorder what surrounds you every day, even if that's just in your mental world, in a space that doesn't feel like it has to be either disembodied or out in the transcendental realms, but also has a grounding in something that feels very, very resonant, even if getting there feels a little challenging to get there with that Mars. Yeah.
Love that. I like this one to be like, if you flip it from what we said about Virgo, and I mentioned that things in the environment slowly shake up the whole paradigm. And I would flip this to say that there's maybe what's happening is very subtle, slow, drawn out changes in bigger systems. For example, being introduced to a powerful new idea as an astrologer, or a new technique, or a new meditation practice if you do yoga or something like that. It's like something on the sort of macro level that's shifting around. Studying something new comes to mind, a new practice, a new technique, maybe even a new experience through traveling or something. But it's some kind of shift that's happening in the 9th house that actually in time is going to create massive changes in your everyday environment. For example, sometimes people, this is something that happened to me in a very 3rd house, 9th house series of transits when I was in graduate school. that I was being introduced to yoga. I started writing for a publication called Reality Sandwich. And basically what happened was, changes in what I was really interested in philosophically. Astrology came in at that time too, right? The big new ideas and systems of knowledge and stuff were coming into my life. Well, that had the effect of I started doing meditation as an everyday practice, yoga as an everyday practice.
Yeah.
I changed my environment. Like I got rid of my TV. Like the artwork in my environment changed. So it's funny how sometimes, the everyday environment, little subtleties change in the ecosystem and then they create a paradigm shift. But sometimes it's like big stuff you're getting excited about trickles down and changes the way your everyday environment looks or what you do day to day. And
Absolutely.
that's how I would see this playing out. Like right now, there's something being stimulated around your beliefs, your philosophies, learning, etc. That in time, by April, is going to have a huge impact on what day-to-day life looks like or what the environment around you looks like.
Really interesting 6 months to carry a journal, to just keep little notes, because sometimes even those third house shifts are so subtle, but then you look back, you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Where was I 6 months ago? Yeah.
Pisceans right now are carrying that Saturnian weight. And, in a water sign in the first house too, I think like it is a really good time for Pisceans to be asking big questions. Like I love this energy in the ninth house for, even if it's a little tumultuous or it's like somewhat provocative, like, what do you believe? I feel like that's sort of, if I had to like personify it in a voice, like, what do you believe, Pisces? Like Pisces, like, I don't know all of it, right? So
it's everything, man. I don't know
everything everywhere all at once. I'm
just enjoying the spin art tip. I'm just, like really good spin art tip.
We joke. Pisceans are I have like, it was funny because at the wedding, I found myself engaging with a cousin that I hadn't seen in a long time. And I was like, I was guessing that she was a Sagittarius, and it like turns out she was a Pisces. And I was like, that's funny. Like, why do I always get that wrong? It's one of the ones I always confuse. I'll always think when I'm talking to a Pisces that I'm talking to a Sag. I get that confusion like all the time. Suddenly I put it together. I was like, the difference between her and a Sag would be, like, just broadly speaking, that as I'm listening to her talk, because both are Jupiter ruled signs that love to talk. At least a lot of Pisceans can really they're really fun, and like, she had Mercury in Pisces too, I think. So she was like really super all over the place and in the best way possible. And she's like, but she was also completely observant of how I was responding and was like adapting constantly, but with this big Jupiterian energy. I was like, Sagittarius can't do that as well. It's like, if I would have picked up on how sensitive and impressionable she was to my responses and reactions to her big energy, I would have known that she was a Pisces. So I thought that was really interesting. But my point is this: when you're a Pisces, Saturn, you're very impressionable. But my message for Pisces is like, don't let it bring you down. Like,
yes.
like you it could almost feel like you're getting some kind of negative feedback because Saturn's in your first house. But it's almost like if you put a Pisces with someone at the table and they're like unresponsive and boring and cold and negating somehow, it could really make a Pisces feel terrible. Just get up and leave that table, my friends.
Right.
Like, you don't have to.
That's what the Sagittarius do.
Yeah, I know, exactly, right? Sagittarius, fucking leave.
You're an asshole. I'm getting out of here.
But Pisces is like, but you're suffering, so I guess I'll have to sit here and suffer too. Oh, I'm kidding, but like, I'm just, my point is that when you're carrying something heavy like that in the first house, it's an opportunity for you to adopt whatever beliefs you need to cling to happiness and like your best jovial qualities. If right now the opposition across your third and ninth can lend itself to a more confident, happy, buoyant mental state, then go for it. Don't feel like you can't do it just because, I don't know, Saturn's hanging out in your first house, giving you the impression that you aren't entitled to believing or thinking in a way that is more conducive to your happiness.
Absolutely. And that you have, if you can take a lesson from Professor Sagittarius over here, is that you don't have to involve yourself in everybody's energy. That's why, you know, it's just like they're just having their thing. You can just go off and, you know, do what you want. Now, trust me, you can get into trouble with that as a Sagittarius too.
I do what I want.
Why is he such a dick? Oh my God.
That's great. I love it. Give yourself Sagittarius's message. Give yourself the comfort of being a dick. You can do.
Give me the comfort. Just being like
you can do it.
You ever see Silver Linings Playbook with Jennifer Lawrence and
Yes.
Bradley Cooper? There's that scene where she just gets up from the table and says, "I'm bored. I want to go home," and leaves. And I'm like, God, that's a Sag at a dinner party. If
Oh man. Well, dear Pisces out there, we get to the end and we're like all punchy because we get to your sign and we're coming around almost across the finish line. Don't be offended. We love you.
We do.
So anyway, we hope that this has been useful for you, and that you've gotten laughs and insights for your month ahead. I want to tell you how you can learn more about Alex's work. You can find him at alexamorosi.com, where you can book a reading or healing session with him. He is a talented energy healer as well as an astrologer and yoga teacher. You can also find him on Instagram at Alex Amorosi Healing, where he also creates regular astrological content and is a really fun person to follow. So make sure you check him out on Instagram as well. Alex, thank you so much for being here again. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Adam. I just fucking love you. This is so much fun every month. I look forward to it.
Me too, for sure. Well, everybody, thank you so much. We hope you guys have a great month ahead, and we will look forward to seeing you next month. Take it easy, everyone.
Bye everyone.